All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, it's Wednesday, and even though we had a major event last night, we are going to stick with Wheel of Time. But just for the audience, the major event turned out, whoops, like this, which is actually awesome. Not just because the person we had talked about wanting to win this one
hmm
won, but because it's not controversial.
hmm
And my top two outcomes last night was Trump in a landslide, Kamala in a landslide. And then after that, Trump in a narrow victory, Kamala in a narrow victory. Because we don't need 2 months of bullshit. We
hmm
need we need this to be okay. We got a concession speech. Hopefully she doesn't try to do something in the next 2 months to solidify some weird thing. There's one rumor floating that we'll call it a conspiracy theory, maybe a spoiler alert, that they're going to 25th Amendment Biden in the last 2 months so she can officially be the first woman president to take that away from a possible future Tulsi Gabbard or something.
hmm
So yeah, that we'll see. There's also the chance that on the way out the door they start World War III. That would suck. Uh,
Yeah, well, that was my concern going in is, all right, if he does win, and we talked before the election, I had no idea because it's so hard to tell what's actually real and what's a bubble
mhm.
anymore. Um, my concern was I was leaning towards it seemed like the momentum had shifted was all right, but then what happens in those several months between election and inauguration with Putin and China and North Korea and Iran and
I don't think they make a move. I'm afraid we make a move because the neocons want World War III because they benefit from it the more than anybody else, and we're the ones that have to suffer for it because they'll just raise the draft age, so we have to go because we're healthier than young people. And and Gen X is actually the ones that turned down the election, so they might want revenge on us older guys. Uh, but the yeah, that's the worry that in the next month or two, it's like, oh, we accidentally dropped some bombs on Iran. Imagine that. Oh, we were just helping Israel. Well, y'all like Israel, right?
yeah,
You know,
like Israel needs the help. But
yeah.
all right. Well, speaking of World War III, we're back in the last battle. We're still in the last battle. Um, the never-ending battle of lastness. Uh I've got
Well, we get a Jylan Sandar moment, which I think this is part of
mhm,
my problem with the Sando spin, and I don't know if
mhm.
it was something that Jordan wanted, but there's a lot of like cameos of people from before that it's like, and this is where this person that you forgot about is, and we put him in a prominent role just so he can show up in this section.
and and I remember having these being dissatisfied, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it with this chapter in particular, with the last battle. And it hit me as I was reading this section, as I've been critiquing, not just being critical, but critiquing as we go. And one of the things that popped into my head, and I keep going back to, is Jordan's economy of words. And this is a great example of that because this section is entirely too long because it doesn't actually tell us anything new or useful. It's just reminding us, as you say, it's just reminding us, hey, remember this guy? He still exists.
Hmm.
Okay. That would be okay if it dawned on me that what we really need here is we need more of these, but they need to be way shorter and jump around a little bit more. If you want to show us what's going on in the different battlefields and in the different parts of the battlefield, like this particular one, now that all the three battles have become one here on the fields of Marilor, this is one huge battle and there's a lot of pieces moving around. So if you want to give us an idea of what's going on and remind us that all these small characters still exist, we should have had more of these scenes, but each scene should have been much shorter.
Or I would have preferred a more cohesive, consolidating approach
Mm-hmm.
where these people pop up in major points of view. So, we've had a lot
Mhm.
of Galad in the battle, which makes sense because he's going to do big things
Mhm.
and he's the leader of the White Cloaks and he's become a prominent character in these
Yep.
last three books. Uh, and you could have had him having a two-paragraph thought of, I've seen this guy before. He was traveling with Elaine and
Mm.
describe, we know
That's
who's,
a good point. Yeah.
and he's like, he's no general, but we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here, which is the
Yep.
thoughts Jylan had in his head. He's like, I'm no general, but we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, so I'll do my part. And
Yeah. This scene should have been a half page or less, and it should have been um if it was going to be from Sandar's point of view, it definitely should have been shorter. And really, the whole point of this entire section is the last couple of sentences, which for me is on page 700, uh, which is him thinking about, well, one, his reaction to all of the one power falling down around him. You get it's a well written reaction to how these normal people feel when with all this power flying around. And him just taking cover and just crossing his fingers that he makes it, because there's nothing he can do. So Sanderson does do a good job of writing that helplessness, but also that what the hell am I doing here bit of, he wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be someplace warm with Amathera, thinking about the next criminal he needed to catch. He figured that every man on the field felt they should be someplace else. The only thing to do was to keep on fighting.
yeah,
So,
good little two-liner. It's good, but
but
like you
it
always talking about,
also,
are you writing the scene or are you writing the movie?
yes,
Yeah.
but it also, in that those couple of sentences, that is the whole point of this thing that goes on for almost 2 pages, is it actually shined a light on the problem here, which is, it suddenly dawned on me, wait a minute, why is he with the Aes Sedai army? How did he go from being part of being with the band but
Remember,
not
he
actually
went
part of the
he,
band?
he went with Jolene and them.
Oh, that's right, they were
Yeah.
headed back to
So
the
yeah.
tower. He went
So
with them.
yeah.
That's right. So something of a reminder. And then how did he go from just kind of tagging along to getting roped into the army and leading a group? There should have been more there, instead of just like going on for a
It's
whole page.
especially when you talk about skill sets and stuff.
Yeah.
You could have had a scene with him like stopping somebody infiltrating, trying to assassinate the Emerald seat or something.
Yep.
Let's use his skill set to his best degree, which is catching nefarious people one on one, not out there leading a charge, So,
Yeah. So instead of just him constantly thinking about,
and then you
I'm
could
not a
have included
soldier,
him
I'm
in an
not a
Egwene
leader.
scene. Yeah.
I'm not a soldier, I'm not a leader. Okay, well then how did you end up as a soldier leading other soldiers? It's that should be in there.
Yeah.
Um
Well,
all
in a,
right.
in a desperate situation, you would imagine that the cream of the crop would kind of rise a little bit, and he is an above average person, or else he wouldn't be a big part of the adventure for these
Yeah.
number of books. So you would expect that would pop. These guys would show up in the army and become shift leaders right away because they're
Yep.
obviously better than the others.
Um all right,
Angel
so then we
Bar is next, yeah.
then we get to Pavar and Androl here, and I had this thought last time, their last section, and then it popped back up here because there was a moment where I thought there was uh, a glitch that was missed in editing, because in their last section there's this moment where it gets confusing of whose point of view it is, and I thought, oh, Sanderson messed up here. But then in at the start of this section it hit me again. I was like, wait a minute, is it just me, or does it sometimes start to get confused over whose point of view it is, Andrel or Pavara's? And then I
Hmm.
wondered, wait, is that on purpose? Is he doing
I
that on purpose because their consciousnesses are kind of merging?
I agree, and I also think it was on purpose. Which I'm not too upset about that. Now, I did say this section. I made a note that I had given them compliments on the newlywed thing, but
Mm-hmm.
then my note here was my compliments to the puppy love go only so far. It just keeps going and going and going, and he keeps
Yeah.
beating that dead
Hmm.
that dead horse. But also, this is where I made a note that it really this is another data point in my thinking that the showrunners only read the Sanderson parts. Because I mean, you're or our discussion last time that Tor might have been pressured to include
Hmm.
more activism in it, and it pressured him there
Are you
because
talking about her thinking about how Amarin likes men
yeah,
and
yeah,
Androl
yeah.
is
I
what?
mean,
Huh?
yeah, that's two times we have a situation like that in this last is Lan and the guy that was grooming the horse, the
Oh
Kandori
yeah, yeah.
noble,
There's
that he's
it's
like,
not
I
as
know he's
blatant
gay.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not quite as blatant there, but it is
Well,
very, very strongly implied so that you can't miss it.
no, he says in his head he likes men.
Oh, I
He'll
didn't
he'll
remember it
never
being that
propose to her
blatant.
because he prefers the company of men or something like that.
Mm,
Yeah. So there's two times in this book that you see that shift, and I brought up the dates. That's when the push for all of that was really uh,
yeah.
a lot of pressure on
Well,
authors and
that was my initial thought there in that moment where they have that exchange, and I rolled my eyes and I kept going, but then I had another thought that, and I think it's actually not to get too in the weeds politically here, but it was when I was scrolling through X and some of the one of the follows that I followed for a long time is a guy named Gabe Patriot, um, who has a lot of interesting takes on politics in general, but also he lives in Florida, so he's had a lot of interesting takes on Florida politics over the years. And he has been like one of these you don't speak for me pounding the drum for, yeah, not all, homosexual people are the same, you a-holes. Um, and why, and also because he's an older guy, I think he's a little bit older than us, is the impression I get generationally. So he's also looking back at the younger generations who are just nuts and saying, what are you doing? Uh and so then I had the thought of, you know, they may be trying to do that, but I think they accidentally canceled themselves because there's a point to be made here about it wasn't that long ago that homosexual people were just people who happened to be attracted to the same sex.
mm-hmm.
And then somewhere along the way, no, if you were a homosexual, especially a homosexual man, you had to be clownishly flamboyant. And no, you could just be a dude who just happens to be attracted to other dudes. And that's basically what is being said here because Amarin's just a dude. He just happens to be sexually attracted to other dudes. That's why Androl is huh? What? Because he's just a dude to Androl. So I feel like they kind of accidentally canceled themselves if they what they were trying to do was have more representation. Um, well, the other part, even
Well,
before
no, this is
that,
where I think Sanderson doesn't really believe in that, but I think he
mm,
might have been pressured.
mm,
So he's like, okay, I have to do this thing. Let me do it in the most circumspect way as possible. Let me try not to take away from the story from here. So I'm going to give him credit here that he may have been forced to include some of this stuff because inclusion is part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But he might have been forced to, and he's like, well, okay, look, I'll put it in there, but I'm going to do it this way.
mm-hmm.
I'm just going to slide it in. Just going to slide it in,
Giggity.
which Amara
Um,
might like. I don't know.
Speaking of getting canceled, when they're having this back and forth as they're sneaking through the Sharan encampment, and Pavar has this thought, Taim had awoken something inside of him by taking his friends and turning them to the shadow. As they followed the old Sharan, Pavar realized that she didn't understand what Andro was feeling. Not completely. And I'll pause there a second before I finish this paragraph. To me, that's very interesting. And again, why you have to be canceled even when if you're trying to be an ally, because she's literally inside his head.
Mm-hmm.
She can, you know, one of the hardest things about empathy is actually you can't actually feel what someone's feeling. You can, you know, um
You
you,
well, you is this is where it blends over to theory of mind. Theory of mind is
Yes.
being able to read somebody, and a lot of that's emotional. So if you can read somebody's facial expressions, body posture,
Mm.
the tone, all of those things, and put it together into they're sad, and then you get sad, that's empathy.
But it's not their feeling. It's your interpretation, or
Hmm.
your referencing something that happened to you. It's, oh, you just lost your father, well, I haven't, but I remember how I felt when my grandfather died. And but she's actually in his head. She literally feels what he feels. She literally, unless they work to keep their minds separately, she literally hears what he's thinking, but she's not him. And she's a woman, which is different than a man. And
No,
that's kind
no.
of what she's getting at here, is that for all that we intuitively know each other now because we have this strange link, we're still separate people, and it's still hard for me to understand you sometimes. Aes Sedai friends of hers had been taken, but it wasn't the same as Androl losing Evan. Evan had trusted Androl, looked to Androl for protection. The Aes Sedai with Pavara had been acquaintances, friends, but it was different. And I don't know if he, Sanderson, understands this literally, or if he's just intuiting the way Jordan wrote things. But one of the things that jumped out to me here is this is a difference between coalition versus hierarchy, between motherly versus fatherly bonds. That is why Androl is having such a strong visceral reaction
Hmm.
to what Taim did, and why he is so driven to bring him to justice, if you will.
I mean, you actually, I could go into brain chemicals and stuff like that, but you said that well enough. I think I have nothing that can make that any better.
All right, then on we go to Galad.
Hmm.
And I still don't like, well, before we get there, so there have several pages of Galad here, and last we saw him, he was given a medallion and told to go hunt channelers. So he's got a dozen of his best men, and they are just out because the battlefield is so splintered and chaotic. They're kind of skulking and moving between these larger units, hunting down the Sharan channelers behind their lines.
Which is
And
which is funny because it brought me to a point that I thought of when I read this section.
mhm,
It's 780 for me, but it's the start of the Galad section, so whatever
mhm,
page that is for you. Uh, but my thought, I said with the Sharan channelers showing up, and actually to think of it with the threat of dreadlords before, Elaine could have been best used making Foxhead medallions for elite troops and distributing them and getting and teaching whatever kin had the affinity for doing Turing Grell to make these
mhm,
Foxhead medallions all along. Because remember, the ones she can make don't allow you to channel, so she can't wear it.
mhm.
So, but you can spit these out to generals and elites in their troops and in the or even like a special forces unit that is made to go wherever the channelers are thickest,
Yep.
that kind of thing. And that would have it was like we've pimped out this talent you have for 10 books, and then you still have two leftovers from this talent, but you never did any more, and it actually would be very useful in this battle.
Hmm. Well, see, I don't have a big problem with it because Elaine is so narrow-minded, because she isn't just the queen, she is also an Aes Sedai, and she does have those binds to the tower. So she is going to be much more controlling over who gets these than Matt is. Matt just sees the need and the opportunity and acts.
Yeah, I guess to that point, it would be very uncomfortable for an Aes Sedai to hand those things out because then
Hmm.
there would be an elite force that would actually be a threat to her at some point.
So Matt is able to see bigger picture because he doesn't have these strong ties that bind him to these traditions and these more narrow ways of thinking. Um I had something entirely different jumped out to me at the beginning of this section, which is when the guy who insists that you have to cut off the head and bury it separately, or else the channeler will come back to life. That comes from vampire lore. That in certain vampire stories, that's how you have to keep the vampire from coming back to life. And this is one of the things I loved about Jordan from the very beginning, from the Eye of the World, when you get all those illusions in when you first meet Tom and they're talking about the stories, and you can see glimpses of our world and our history, but then how they get twisted. I love that this is an origin story for vampires. So you can see how in another age this weird idea is where that story comes from. But then this story itself is a mystery of, wait, where did he even get this idea? Where did this origin story? So there is this hilariously odd game of telephone being played through history,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably why I love Ancient Apocalypse so much, because that's kind of what he's talking about. Is this is deciphering this millennia long game of telephone that is history and trying to decipher what the heck it means. All right.
Speaking of deciphering, I have a note here, and I used apparently abbreviations and alliteration, and I have no idea what I wrote.
Yeah, I've done that before. It's very annoying. Um, all right, but then we get to the actual meat of this. And so because overall I was fairly dissatisfied with the last battle and then with this sequence of Gawyn and then Galad going after and confronting Demandrid, um, I had kind of forgotten the details. And so this was something of a gut punch because we've in critiquing and analyzing Galad and him growing on us so much. And I had forgotten this whole sequence where he's the one who finds Gawyn. I had forgotten this whole that happened before he went after Demandrid and was the inciting incident for him to go after Demandrid. So I'm still not wild about the sequence because it does make the ending it feel kind of anticlimactic by the time Demandrid finally meets his end. The fact that we had two false starts here kind of to me takes away from it, but um it also made me wonder, even though I don't like the sequence, I don't think this is a Sanderson thing. I'm thinking this was outlined by RJ, because as you read this sequence, what you can't help but think about or should be thinking about is going way back to the Dragon Reborn, where we first meet them together in the tower when they're studying to be warders. And Elaine tells the story of Galad saving Gawyn's life when they were kids and Gawyn fell into the pond.
Mm-hmm.
And without hesitation, Galad jumps in and pulls him out. That's what you're supposed to be thinking. And he doesn't he it's very cleverly written because you don't want to hang a lampshade on that because it detracts from it. No, you just want the feeling. And he does a very good job of Galad. No, this is my little brother. I'm the one who's supposed to protect him. It should be me dying on the field, not him. And so he does a great job of really making it emotional and tying in this thread, this seed that was planted a dozen books ago.
I do think Sanderson did a good job of writing the emotion into that scene, though. You know, when Galad's trying to get his brother to help, and just maybe a little overdone on the don't hate Rand like I did, because we never got an indication that Galad actually ever hated Rand,
Mm-hmm.
because he's just like, well, he's the Dragon Reborn. I guess he has to live. Okay, next, because that's how Galad works.
Well, but to me, it worked because that was Gawyn. Is he was the more emotional one. He was the
Hmm.
more and now here as his life is fading away and he has these regrets, and a dying man is going to want to voice these regrets, but also, you know, urge his brother to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah, and you kind of needed that moment because realistically, what happens next is an emotional decision,
mhm,
and it's going to take a lot for Galad to make an emotional decision.
yeah. Um, I also I like the I like the way it ends and then transitions. This is a great transition of I will do what needs to be done, Galad said, cold inside, cold as winter steel. I will bring light to the shadow, I will bring justice to the Forsaken. I love that the cold as winter steel. And then we transition to Egwene, who feels Gawyn's thread of life vanish, and she just loses it emotionally, as she would, and there's a very human moment here. And then when we go back to Egwene of she had said, I can handle this. I will keep fighting. And she had no idea what was about to happen to her,
Mm-hmm.
which is, yeah, she's still a young woman. You can say all you want, I can handle this, but then when it happens and it hits you like a freight train, I love that human moment of weakness for her, especially since we are so critical of her so often. And to Sanderson's credit, it's as long as it needs to be. It's only about a half-page long scene,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's done. He's very concise with what he does and how he shows us that reaction. Um, so then we get a Tam scene. We get a couple of Tam scenes here that I like, and just as an overall kind of meta point on them, because I brought this up last time, and I hadn't yet reread these scenes um in preparation for today, and then when I did, I was like, he just answered my question. I had this thought of, what is Tam the World War II veteran who seemingly had it together? When you think of PTSD and veterans that weren't able to readjust to society, you tend to think of the Vietnam veterans, right? And so there's this idea that the World War II vets didn't have PTSD. No, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Of I can't remember if I've told this story while we were recording or not, but I was talking to my dad a while ago, and I don't even know how it came up, but we were talking about his dad's service, and uh, his dad went to went into the Air Corps and was slotted for bombardier training. And so he trained as a bombardier for heavy aircraft, Liberators and B-17s. And he scored so well in his training that he was kept on to be an instructor, which meant he never deployed. Um, I think I did talk about this when we were talking about Masters of the Air. That
Mm-hmm.
so he never deployed, and Dad mentioned that later in life, as my dad grew and more experienced and more wise, he realized that what when Paul would talk about the war and talk about friends, you know, colleagues that he trained with and then went on to the 8th Air Force, he had a lot of survivor's guilt that as a youngster my dad didn't recognize because he didn't know what that was. So here you have someone who didn't even experience combat, but because the totality of the war was so horrific, he still suffered mentally because of it, because he wasn't there, and that racked him with survivor's guilt. Because
Hmm.
so many of the people who did go off, whether that as people he grew up with or people he trained with, they didn't come back. But I think the thing that let them cope is the fact that when these veterans came back, they came back to life. They came back to structure. They came back
Hmm.
to tradition. So when you came back, your goal was get a job, get a girl, start a family. And in these scenes, this one and in the next one, Tam is actually having this thought of he had Carrie Althor, he had an infant Rand, he had a farm, he had stuff to do. It kept him busy because these emotions, these thoughts of the blood snow in particular, but I love the intimations that he fought much more than just at the blood snow. The blood snow was just the worst of all of the combat he experienced, but you get the impression he experienced a lot of combat.
Well, you don't rise to where he was without
Exactly.
experiencing combat. Especially they make semi-famous in these books the constant fighting between Tyr and Ilian,
Mm-hmm.
and then so it's skirmishes probably, but he at least rose through the ranks in the elite guard.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't just some guy who graduated from West Point and was put in the top.
So he had he had all the emotional scarring that anyone else would, but he had a structure to deal with it. He had a structure to continue to live life and not let those emotional scars overcome him. Well, what happened to Rand? Rand was yanked out of his structure. He was yanked out of that support system. And then he was told this incredible thing that terrified him and then put through these incredible challenges, and then he was broken away from the support system he had with him when he was taken from his home
Well, not only
because
broken away from them, but encountering very influential forces that
mhm.
want to push him in certain directions, like Lanfear, for instance.
And so he loses Perrin, and Matt starts to grow farther and farther away from him because Matt doesn't want any part of what is going on with Rand. And then add salt and lemon juice to the paper cut. One of his primary points of support, and you see this in Egwene's trials, you see this in some of the mirror worlds in the Great Hunt. They were supposed to start that family. They were supposed to be together. And now all of a sudden, not only is he losing his puppy love, his first love, she's becoming she's becoming an opposition to him.
Hmm.
And is it any wonder that Rand goes nuts? And Rand has trouble coping with what is being thrust upon him. And I think that is why that scene when he goes to spar with Tam, all of this soup of ugliness and nastiness that has been beating Rand down for 13 books now when he does this, or was it the beginning of this book? I can't even remember. It's all bleeding together. But that is why that scene works and why Rand needed it. Because even after his transformation on the top of Dragon Mount, he he wasn't truly whole yet until he goes to see who? His father, who's been through this before and knows what Rand needs more than anyone else. And also has the years, the experience, the wisdom to know how to impart that knowledge that Rand needs.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing I love about this scene in particular, this Tam's section in particular, is right at the beginning. Um, or so for me, it's the very bottom of page 709 when they run out of arrows and Tam tells them all, leave the bows here. We will fetch them when more arrows come our way. I love this line. More arrows wouldn't come, But the Two Rivers men would be happier pretending that they might go back to their bows. I think the reason I love it so much is there's a strong implication that Tam knows he's lying, but all the guys know that he's lying too. But they don't care. It's just that Two Rivers stubborn farmer mentality of
Mm-hmm.
Tam, Abel, and all the nameless new and old Two Rivers men that are there. Yeah, yeah, we'll come back to the bows, sure. And they all pretty much think they're about to charge into their death because they have no idea that, skipping ahead a second, in the next scene, the next Tam point of view, they have absolutely no idea that Matt sent Lan and his Borderlander cavalry way around to come in and help them.
Mm-hmm.
So they all are this knowing, almost joking lie of, yeah, we'll be fine. And they know they're not going to be fine.
Nope.
But
Nope.
nope, but they still do it. Um the
Which
next section,
takes us to Matt, but through Fortuana's
yes.
point of view. There was one part of that I thought was kind of funny. For me, at 788, it's kind of about a page, a little over a page in,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and she's talking about uh, how Matt Notai, she
Mm-hmm.
this other person. She's saying this other person, Darbinda, which
Yeah.
was is like him,
Mm-hmm.
stubbornly humble. These mainlanders,
Oh,
they were actually proud,
yeah.
of their lowborn heritage, and
Baffling.
yeah,
Dar-
baffling.
Darbinda is Min. That is her new
Oh,
name
okay, okay.
for as the Truth Seeker, and I love that about Tawan. I love that about the Sanshin, and it's Sanderson does such a good job of writing from her point of view when he doesn't let Matt's silliness bleed into it too much.
Oh,
Because
we get to that in a couple
yeah,
pages.
we get that in a couple of pages, but
Yeah.
this is why they don't understand each other, why they don't speak the same languages. Yeah, they're proud of their lowborn heritage because it's the poem on the Statue of Liberty that people don't understand. It's the bring me your, okay, that's not saying we are the repository of anyone seeking refuge. And no. It's you, the old world, you think these are lowly people, but let them come here where they are free to go as far as their effort, their will, and their talents will let them, and we'll show you what they can do. Because here, you are truly a free man, and you can do what you will.
Sorry for that hiccup. I cut Keith off mid sentence. I thought he had paused long enough that he wanted the pause, but
My brain is just hiccuping a lot because I'm tired.
but this was funny because the lowborn heritage and the disconnect, the cross mind reading, the cross class mind reading here, it's very indicative, and this is why, when we put cultures on all these different places, they rhyme with the world. And I mean, it's very obvious that Jordan was going for the American South with the people from the Two Rivers, and we're called, I know it's the opposite of your low trust society there, isomorphic, but we're called an honor culture, and we've had to go through this in class because honor culture is bad if you're woke, because you don't want to go to mental health institutes and get talk therapy or whatever, and it's the traits of honor culture are masculine, and that's bad because that's toxic and all these things. And I'm like, it came up last night, because I was like, there's if you come from the American South and you were poor, there is a pride that comes from that, because we were talking about system justification, where
Mhm.
your mentality causes you to have behaviors that perpetuate the system or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it does kind of perpetuate the system, because we don't go to the doctor for everything. Let me tell you what it's like, you middle class white girls in this class. You know, you don't go to the doctor for everything, and you're actually proud of that. You're looking at, rich people and, the hoi polloi, and you're going, yeah, look how weak they are. Look how not robust they are. Look how fragile they are. Look how mentally unstable they are. That's why they go to mental health professionals. It's because they're mentally unstable. We're strong. And so even though you don't have the money, there's a pride that goes along with being poor. And it actually becomes an identity that comes out of it. And what I try to tell this class is there are bad things about it. Maybe there are times you should go to a doctor. But at the same time, maybe being more robust is something this whole country needs. And we can learn back and forth on that. And that's what I thought of when I read that line. I was like, yeah, I mean, there is a pride to that.
Mhm.
I remember that because my grandpa used to always say, we say it's lunchtime. He goes, we don't eat lunch. Lunch is for rich people. He would say, we have breakfast, dinner, and supper. Lunch is for rich people.
Yep.
All right. That was just my little fun thought, but we can move on.
Well, then we get a really meaty Rand in the Dark One section here, several pages long of good quality, what I continue to believe is RJ himself writing. And right off the bat, too, is um there, because there's a lot of wait, what? In this short little paragraph here, Rand knew this struggle between them, the fight for what could be, was vital to the last battle. Rand could not weave the future. He was not the wheel nor anything like it. For everything that had happened to him, he was still merely a man. Yet in him was the hope of humankind. Humankind had a destiny, a choice for its future, the path they would take. This battle would decide it, his will clashing with that of the Dark One. As of yet, what could be might become what would be. Breaking now would be to let the Dark One choose that future. There are so many ifs and maybes and what does here, really just in that first sentence. This struggle between them, the fight for what could be, was vital to the last battle. Wait, huh? Why? What do you mean? What does that mean?
Well, because
How does that?
he's
Yeah.
falling into the Dark One's trap, which the overall message here is something we talk about all the time is Rand's mistake at this point in the battle is he's trying to be an authoritarian as much as the Dark One is trying to be an authoritarian.
Mhm.
He's trying to make it what he wants it to be versus letting the world happen. Remember his key line a few books ago, I exist.
Mhm.
In this battle, he keeps falling in the trap of not letting the world just exist.
Mhm. But I also think that RJ is giving a lot of clues as to how things are going to end in the very end and what happens. I haven't untangled it all, but this idea, this fight for what could be being the real last battle, being vital to what's going on here. And keeping in mind that where this weird existential place that is kind of this a little bit of the world of dreams, a little bit of the mirror worlds, a little bit of something and nothing altogether. I think it's important that where the battle is taking place, this weird space that exists out of reality and time, kind of looking in on all reality and time at the same time. Um, and then the Dark One weaves a new possibility, a new dystopia that is radically different from the previous dystopia. And this first encounter with this woman who just shoots a street urchin with no change in her face, and Rand looks at her, the look in her eyes, utter lack of any kind of human sympathy or concern. And I don't remember who first came up with this, the idea of smiley face fascism,
Mm-hmm.
that if and when fascism ever comes, it was someone talking about the US in particular, it's not going to be jackboots marching down the streets like it was in Europe in the 30s. It's going to be with a smiley face. It's going to be, you know, this is for your own good instead of just the psychopathy of the Nazis, the blatant psychopathy of it. It's also something it made me think of was your favorite mathematician and philosopher, David Berlinski. It's something he talks about in his book, The Devil's Delusion, which is one of the problem of evil for atheists, for a lot of atheists, the more outspoken kinds, is how could a good God exist? How could the God of Bible exist when so much evil exists in the world? And people like Berlinski turn that on its head and say, well, actually, how can evil, how do you explain um how do you explain goodness without a benevolent God, without the God of the Bible? And again, Berlinski, I haven't brought him up in a while. The guy's a secular Jew. He's not a believer himself, but he looks at this and says, no, this is a good and noble philosophy of human goodness, of ethic. And that's what you see here is we take away the very idea of sympathy, of concern, of humanity. And then what does that leave us? That leaves us with people who just shoot a street urchin for stealing a peach without the blink of an eye. You
Well,
see.
I get a little bit same direction, but a little bit different.
Mm,
Is it's almost there's no emotion at all, for good or bad.
mm,
And when you take basically, it is a world of psychopaths. There is just what is in front of me and what I need at the moment. And the emotion is dialed down to 11 because we see with Basil Gill in a
mm-hmm.
second, he reasons about it. He's just like, this is the
Yeah.
what a lot of Christians say the Sam Harris world would be, the moral landscape world, where you tried to reason through everything to be what's right and wrong.
Yeah. Hold on. I love this exchange here of Gil, Rand said, backing away and seizing the source. What are you doing? Well, I figure that coat will sell for something, Gil said. He didn't sound the least bit apologetic. And so you'll rob me? Well, yes. Gil seemed confused. Why wouldn't I? And then he rationalizes because of the law, Rand said. Why would there be laws against theft? Gil asked, shaking his head. Again, I love that he seemed confused. It's what? What? Yeah, of course I'm going to rob you. What manner of person are you to think such things? If a man cannot protect what he has, why should he have it? If a man cannot defend his life, what good is it to him? And then when the Dark One speaks, when Rand, yells at him, "What have you done?" I love again the great economy of words here of Jordan at the end, where where he uh where the Dark One explains, we've gone. This is the photo negative of the last dystopia I showed you. This is the Dark One speaking. Men who think they are oppressed will someday fight. I will remove from them not just their will to resist, but the very suspicion that something is wrong. So basically, what Jordan has done here so wonderfully is he showed us 1984, and now we're seeing Brave New World. So you will leave them without compassion, Rand demanded. Compassion is not needed. Rand felt deathly cold. This is different from the world you showed me before. And I love this exchange. What I showed before is what men expect. It is the evil they think they fight. But I will make a world where there is no good or evil. There is only me. To your point about Rand forgetting he has to exist. And that's what the Dark One is doing here. There is only me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just I exist. There is nothing else. Uh yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think it's just a testament to all authoritarianism, realistically, because
mhm.
it doesn't matter who's on top, no matter how good they think they are, no matter how evil you think they are. If they try to do top down ordering or disordering in some of these cases, then it's always going to be a reflection of the person doing it,
Mhm.
not a reflection of the people involved in it.
Which is important to remember because what RJ is setting up so wonderfully here is we went to 1984 and then we went to Brave New World, and now the good guy is going to create his own utopia, which turns out to be just another kind of dystopia.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're trying to get to, and where we'll
Yeah.
hopefully end here.
Yeah, all you
Um,
commies out there, you will do it right this time. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, sure.
But first we switch to a Matt section. Um, and I feel like it's my only thought here for this section was, well, this was pretty good, but only because nothing goes horribly wrong. Um, I like the exchange with Min. I think it's very good. I think it's very Matt and Min both. I think he does a pretty good job of capturing the characters in this moment, and then him moving on. Even his exchanges back and forth with Kared is pretty good. He doesn't beat the dead horses. Matt doesn't go too overboard. It's not. There's still a bit of an uncanny valley to me because it's Matt's still not quite right, but it's a lot better than it
Hmm.
usually is. So kudos to that. Um, and then we switch back to the Tam section, which I was referencing earlier. Um, And this was another part where what I thought back at the beginning is, as much as I like this section, and as much as I like how Tam gets to shine and how well he writes him, I would rather have this been open with this section with Tam because I really like it. Um there's a good bit of thinking here of Tam thinking about, um you know he's tired, but fortunately, a Reed did not need strength. So his thoughts in the void of what it is. Um, yeah, here it is. Despite practice over the last few months, Tam wasn't nearly as strong as he had been in his youth. Fortunately, a Reed did not need strength. He was not as practiced as he had once been, but no Reed practiced how to bend in the wind. It simply did. And this is the part I was talking about the years of maturing,
Hmm.
about how life had helped him understand the void so much more. Is we've talked about it, boy, I wish I knew when I was wrestling. I wish I had knew what I knew when I was trying to coach, because you realize, oh, I get it now. You just life teaches you these things. But back to our point earlier, I would have loved if this would have switched to someone like Daniel, of let us have a point of view from one of these minor people, or Abel. Abel, his lifelong friend, this guy I've known Tam my whole life, except for that brief period of time where he left. Holy crap.
Hmm.
I would have loved to see this from the outside looking in, similar to how Jordan wrote when we first see Galad, and it's like, holy crap. And you see it from, it's either, I think it's 90's point of view, where he's like out in front of everyone, basically fighting 10 guys all at once.
Hmm. And then that's when
And
she
it's like,
compares it to someone dancing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would have loved to have seen, instead of being in Tam's head for the whole section, switch to like Abel or Daniel or someone else, so we get a little bit of their point of view of the battle, and also a holy crap, look at the old man go.
Or even since he shows up here, you could just have him show up a little earlier. And this whole scene from Land's point of view.
Hmm.
That again, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm kind of with a lot of the people who are kind of tired by the 13th book
Hmm.
on the viewpoint switches and who's
Yeah.
who, and all the so I actually think a little consolidation here would have been better. And had we seen that from Land's point of view, not only could we see Tam being awesome, but we could have had a swordsman view of it.
Yes. that may be kind of why he didn't do it. Is I don't know if Sanderson would have been able to pull that off.
Well, he tries to
Um,
pull off things he can't pull
yeah,
off all the time.
that's
So
true. That's true.
yeah,
Yeah. Instead, all we get, I mean, it's a nice line, but I feel like it loses a little bit of the impact. I had long wondered, Lan said to Tam, about the man who had given Rand that heron-marked blade. I wondered if he had truly earned it. Now I know. Lan raised his own sword in salute. Um, and now I've lost my train of thought. I've lost my notes. Oh, here we go. Um, so we do get a nice Tam section, and then it moves on. It shows us kind of how things are going, and now progresses the battle forward. And then we switch to a lane, and my my note on this Elaine section was meh. It's all right because it's back to annoying Elaine instead of insufferable Elaine.
I have no notes on this section. I just kind of glossed over it, I guess.
Yeah. It Brigitte has to drag her off and ride off with her because Demandred has basically found her and decided to target her because somehow Demandred knows about Rand and Elaine, which isn't surprising. They have spies everywhere. And he has decided, all right, finally, this will finally draw you out, is I'm going to target this woman you love and who is probably carrying your children.
Well, and he also probably took an interest in that because I mean it wasn't completely not obvious that
Mm-hmm.
Rand and Elaine had something going, especially in the early days. And she's also the most like Ilyana
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
than
that's a
any
good
of the
point.
three girls. So he may have been like that. That's his type right there. So any circumstantial evidence, which he's doing in this battle, any circumstantial
Yeah.
evidence, he's assuming it's loose there. And so any circumstantial evidence is enough to say that's his babies.
Yeah. Um, then we switch back to Galad briefly as he rides up to Demandred. And my dislike of the narrative structure is muted by the pure badassery of this moment. It's written very well, and you get to see Galad being awesome without being too over the top. And also because you get a cool Demandred moment here. And when he is economical with his words is when Sanderson is best, because you get, you know, this exchange. The action is written pretty well, which I sometimes criticize Sanderson. You can follow it well. And then Demandred, Galad yelled, Demandred, you call for the Dragon Reborn. You demand to fight him. He is not here, but his brother is. Will you stand against me? Um, so I love that moment. Uh, I love the thought in his head of, holy crap, Rand al'Thor is my brother, but the brother I actually knew just died, but I've got to push all that away. Very similar, really, to kind of what we saw with the Tam point of view. But I I really like is it here or my oh yeah. Demandred's response I love because it tells you so much about Demandred in a very brief moment of um may you give a better match than your brother, little man. I grow displeased. I love this sentence. Lews Therin can hate me or rail against me, but he should not ignore me. I mean, that's his whole point of being,
Mm-hmm.
really. When you get down to it, that's Demandred.
Well, and it's a very human motivation because if you have competed with somebody all your thousands of years of existence
Mhm.
and it had always to be ignored would be the worst fate. To be beat is bad, but to be ignored, to have this person say, you know what, there's something more important than you. See ya.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah. No, I got.
It's
I
the
don't, I don't
male
really care
version of
about your life
Lanfear.
that much. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause-
It's a good point. All right. Um, then we switch to a very short but interesting naive point of view, and interesting because something jumped out at me here, which um Where'd it go? Yeah, there's this little section here between that section and before we switch back to Matt. And the last sentence of this Nynaeve point of view. Rand and Morden did not move, but she felt something thrumming from them. Rand was fighting a fight she could not see. But what jumped out at me, and I hadn't really thought about before, is wait, why did Moradin freeze? Because remember what instigated the true battle here, as Rand called it when he went into this weird place,
Was he
is
stepped in that?
he touched the heel of his foot touched the blackness and he froze.
From what I understood of the earlier descriptions of that fight, the closer you are to that blackness, the more time slows. And Moradin may be just going so slow that he
Yeah,
looks to be
can't
frozen.
see it. Well, here's the thought I had is that makes me think, well, wait a minute, what is Morden's role here? Why is he even here if, as the Dark One says, this is our true battle? When Rand steps into that in-between place. And again, why is he frozen? Because I'm operating under the assumption that he is actually frozen, that it has been because in I don't remember if it's in this one or her earlier section, Nynaeve has a thought. I think she gives a time to it that it's hard to tell time here, but it seems to her like they've been stuck that way for something like 15 minutes, which I figure even if he was moving very slowly, she would have noticed because Nynaeve is savvy and perceptive. So I'm
Well, look, I
operating under the
mean,
assumption that he's frozen, but no,
think of those rocks that in those places of the world where the
mhm.
rocks actually move
Well,
because
but
of
no,
the vibrations, and you
here's
can't
my
see them move.
thinking. Here's where the thinking brought me though of if Morden is also frozen. When especially in those first couple of scenes, when the Dark One is speaking directly to Rand, the Dark One keeps saying Avatar. That's what he calls Rand, is Avatar or adversary. And it made me think, well, wait a minute, is that Morden's point for the Dark One? Because if the Dark One somehow exists in this place outside of the pattern, does he need Moradin as his conduit to be able to touch and manipulate the pattern? In much the same way that that Rand is the avatar for the creator, who isn't taking part but is influencing through Rand, and then Rand is able to pull and draw in these threads to weave what might be.
I think no, because Rand was fated and Moradin slash Ishi joined.
Well, according to Ishi, no, because according to Ishi, he is always the avatar of the Dark One.
Well, and maybe so, but that's what the Dark One's trying to break, to no longer need that.
Yeah.
And this is where Ishi is kind of effed here because he's under the guise that it will all be nothingness at the
Mm-hmm.
end of it. And he'll
Mm-hmm.
finally be released from this. But we're getting from this battle inside the dark that no, he's not. He's going to be in that same soul trap, just with the Dark One able to touch the world.
Well, I'm going to keep that in my mind as we go forward because the end of Rand and the Dark One's encounter has always been kind of fuzzy to me and annoyingly so. And so that's kind of really what I've been looking forward to and building up to through this whole reread is to get to this point, this battle, this confrontation between Rand and the Dark One and the nature of it, and then how then you interpret the very end of things, the very, very end of the book of okay, how does what happened actually happened? All right. Um, then we switch to a map point of view, which is a pretty good one. Although it's not as annoying as the scene you hate so much where he rides right into the battle, but
Mm-hmm.
Sanderson is still kind of doing the thing of I need to feel the pulse of the battle, and he's
Mm-hmm.
actually engaging. But because he doesn't actually write out the fighting, it feels better because it feels like, he's moving through the battle and just kind of getting caught up in things similar to what happened in his first battle, which was in front of Karheen when the band begins to form. That's basically what he was doing, is he was moving through this battle space where all these units are engaging, and he kept just kind of getting sucked into things. And it kind of seems like that's what's going on here. But I will say this is one of the best map moments and best map lines, I feel, in the whole series. So kudos to Sanderson for this. And this is when,
I wonder if it's the same line I put in quotations in the
well, for
notes.
me, it's when Davram Bashir shows up and he's having this back and forth with him, and he needs someone he can trust to go deliver a message for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells him to ride to Lan and tell Lan what to do. But Davram is objecting. I don't care if you've bloody been touched by the shadow, Matt said. I love this line. Every man has had the Dark One's finger on his heart, and that's the bloody truth. Yep.
Yep.
You can fight through it. I love that. Every man has had the Dark One's finger on his heart, and that's the bloody truth.
Which spoken from the guy who carried the dagger for a while.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, exactly. So he knows a thing or two about having that darkness and having to fight through it.
Which is funny because a couple pages later, if you have anything in that thing, I had a comment about Matt and what one of his strengths might be, and it actually would make a lot of sense to be related to that comment.
Well, my last thought on this isn't related to Matt. It's when he encounters the Ogier and the Ogier group come up to him and he's talking to Loyal.
Mm-hmm.
I had somehow forgotten about this part, but there's this interesting bit, which for me is on page 729. And it's the paragraph that begins with, the Ogier broke the Trolloc fist they'd been fighting, making them flee. Elaine soldiers moved in and blocked the rest of the Trolloc army, and the several hundred Ogier pulled back to Matt. And this is really interesting, and I don't know what to make of it. But we had complained before about how we wanted more of this encounter. And we never really get it. Instead, we get just these very oblique references that make me scratch my head and go, what the hell is going on here? Among them, Matt noticed, were more than a few of the Sanshin Ogier, the Gardeners. He had not ordered that. The two groups fought together, but barely seemed to look at one another now. Huh. That, to me, that says something about the Ogier, and it says something about the Gardeners, which we never really get. And I kind of think this is probably purposeful on RJ's part, because he said he liked to leave certain things mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to answer all the questions. And I think this was probably one of those, I'm going to give a little kernel here, but I'm not going to tell you about the Gardeners. I know you want to know, and you want to know why they are so different from the Ogier that you know.
Well, I always speculated in my own head that these are what happened when you survive the longing and there's no steading in Shanshan.
Mm, that is a thought of it. If because they didn't have the steading, because they didn't have the help from they had help from people, the Ogier in Randland, they had help to survive the longing and refine the steading. We don't know what happened with during the breaking anywhere else. We only get the brief glimpses of the breaking here through Rand's eyes as he's going backwards in time in Reread. So, I mean, that they may have found some mechanism or some way to adjust and react and adapt.
Well,
That was very different.
they may still die at a younger age than standard Ogier.
Yeah.
And that would make you a little bit nihilistic and likely to be an elite level fighting force.
There's this, we get these strange references to the gardeners that the Death Watch Guard are owned by the Empress. But someone makes a point. I think it may be Khared in his point of view in Knife of Dreams, where there is something different with the gardeners, but that's between the gardeners and the Empress. So apparently normal people don't even know.
Hmm.
Well, and a Death Watch guard is hardly normal. Even someone who should be in a position to know doesn't know why the gardeners are bound to the Empress in the way that they are. And so if those of you out there, if you've got your own theories of what the heck is up with that, throw them out there, because at this point we're just, you know, throwing darts and hypothesizing because there's just not a lot of information, which again is one of the things that makes it work, because Jordan makes it the whole series work and makes it so infinitely rereadable, is because not only is he able to introduce a very minor character and have them instantly be a real life human, but he's able to introduce these complex alien societies and yet have them be fully formed cultures, even when you have huge gaps in your knowledge. And it
Hmm.
just makes you want to know more about them rather than being, what the heck is going on here? Uh,
I'm not going to go. I'm going to resist the urge to go on the tangent of creativity and our prior knowledge affecting that. But because I brought up in cognitive the other day the fact that maybe ghosts are just our inability to comprehend sentient gaseous beings. But that, we had a lovely conversation about that. But
yeah,
I like to derail our conversations in class. That we
so that's
have the
fine.
best ones, and then we're like, oh, we didn't talk about the topic at all. But but my note on this was actually something that about a kind of a meta thought about Matt is a little bit after that he's a stupid line with Reread where he's like, unfortunately, so I am I of being insane.
Mm-hmm.
But right after that, he starts feeling the tug, the dice rolling, and then the
Yep,
tug from
yep.
Rand,
Mm-hmm.
and he's being pulled towards Rand, and he's able to just cognitively say, "Not now, I'm busy."
Mm-hmm.
And what
Mm-hmm.
if that was Matt's strength all along when it comes
Hmm.
to being Tavarin with Rand? What if that is one of the things Rand needed from him was to not always be there, was to be able to pull away and do what needs to be done, even though he's kind of always being pulled in that direction. And I was, it just seemed like that actually would make sense with the way Matt has played out.
That does make a lot of sense, because he is by far the most independently minded of the major of the five youngsters that come out of the two rivers and are so important to the story. And Matt is by far the one who goes his own way the most.
Well, we'll go with that conversation on creativity because one of the things about Matt is he's the most open-minded, he's the most creative of the group. And there's a lot that wouldn't have happened had he not ventured out away from Rand. The
Mm-hmm.
Shanshan, for instance, wouldn't be in this battle if he hadn't gone away, if he hadn't severed himself from that. And when we talk about creativity, one of the concepts we're talking about that doesn't allow us to be creative is mental fixation. You have a previous experience that your mind locks to and limits how far you can explore outside of that. But some people are better at that than others.
Mm.
And on a meta level, he's spiritually better at doing that. And that's what allows him to keep venturing out away from the draw to go back to the fixated point.
Yeah. Then we get a short little Egwene section, which I have no thoughts on, except it was fine.
Uh, what, where are we at? Okay, so yeah, I had no thoughts on that too because
Yeah.
I'm on Galad again already.
Because yes, then we go back to the actual duel with Galad, and it's I think this is a credit to how well this whole section is written, that I had a thought when I got to the end of it, and I had to go back and I had to scan back through just to double check and go, huh, yeah, because he's so seamlessly in Galad's head, that I think it is perfect. Galad never speaks. He never says a single word out loud. Once they after he says, I'm here, I'm the dragon's brother, come fight me, and then it's he never says a word. And I think that's perfect. You know, Gawyn had some exchanges with Demandred. He actually talked during their fight, and I think it's perfect for Galad for who he is, and also really helps the scene. He never says anything.
Hmm.
Even at the very end, all he does is he spits at his feet and is ready for whatever comes. Um, did you have any thoughts on it?
Uh, I had a kind of again another meta thought where he's talking about testing his assumptions and how that's how he lives his life,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, that's my theory on the cure for Dunning-Kruger effect.
Hmm.
Is if you're constantly testing, you will not be able to over assume what you know, and that's a good survival skill. And Galad's one of the best.
Yeah. Then we switch to another Androl Pravara scene here, which is pretty good. And yet I didn't have any notes on it. I just like that was pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
it's this is just kind of build. It's
mhm.
building up to a certain thing. So yeah, it's the same stuff we talked about with them. Let's see, Arganda.
And then we get to this Arganda point of view, which is a pretty good section, and it's pretty lengthy. It's he Sanderson writes the action pretty well, but it's way too long for a
Hmm.
point of view for someone we don't really care about. It's I like the structure of the scene, which is we're going to focus on not just a part of the battlefield, but on a much smaller part of the battlefield because Arganda is leading his own group. And so he's not even seeing, let alone the whole battle around the fields of Marilor, is Arganda isn't even seeing this fight for the heights. He's just seeing what's in front of him. So I like that. The other thing I like about the section is I love Demandred's ranting and narrating in the background that Arganda hears. It's that booming voice. Arganda doesn't know what is going on and he doesn't care.
Hmm.
So I love that the disconnected nature of all that. But again, it would have been so much better if this scene, which for me starts on page 739 and goes to 744. That should have been like a different person every page. It's like a page of Arganda, and then we switch to a page back, maybe back to Tam, or a page of Abel or Daniel or someone like that, instead of this really long section with someone we don't care about that much, and so all of this fighting is just it's the criticism of the later Marvel movies that have come out since Endgame, which is, oh, we've gone too long since we had a action scene, so now we need a fight scene now. Well, no, the early movies worked so well because the action scenes were part of the plot and moved the plot forward and told you something about the characters. It wasn't just we need something flashy to distract the audience.
Hmm.
All right. And then
Back
we
to Rand.
switch back to Rand and we get his utopia that is not so utopian, but it is interesting to me. A couple of things. The very opening of it is Jordan is telling you something, and the pattern is trying to tell Rand something. The threads of possibility resisted Rand as he wove them together into the world he imagined. He did not know what that meant. Perhaps what he demanded was highly unlikely. This thing he did, using threads to show what could be, was more than simple illusion and involved looking to worlds that had been before, worlds that could come again, mirrors of the reality he lived in. He's telling you a lot about the nature of what's going on here in the meta, in the macro, but then also a whole lot about in the micro of what's about to happen here in this particular mirror world that Rand is about to create.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also like I think it also tells you something about these mirror worlds and about this fight between the Dark One, that the Dark One's voice is suddenly very quiet because the Dark One can't enter into this, because even though this is a what if, it's still real enough that if he fully entered, he would cease to exist because Rand created a place where the Dark One no longer exists. And I think that's pretty cool. Uh, what are your thoughts on this section? Because it's pretty lengthy, and I don't have most of my thoughts are towards the end.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go there because I'm trying to see where my next note was.
Well, my next note is about the singing because you've brought that up before.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
As
I'm way out of this section from
as he's walking by and he's seeing all this, and you're getting all of this explanation. And I love the setup. You get 2 pages of setup here that is painting this picture for you of this is a utopia. This is beautiful. This is wonderful. Look how happy everyone is.
hmm
And Rand walks by and he sees the Aiel have returned to the way they used to be, which includes, though he could not hear their words, he saw the Aiel singing. So they're back to singing to the Korra trees.
hmm
I didn't really catch this before, and I think this is RJ explaining why the song not only isn't found, but can't be found. Okay. I think this is RJ saying the wheel turns, man. It's going to be different. You cannot, this is basically the Luz Theron part of Rand trying to force the Age of Legends to be recreated. And I think part of what the pattern is telling Rand here and what RJ is saying is things change. It's going to be different. You cannot recreate the Age of Legends. That's the whole idea of time as a wheel. It turns. To your point of who is it, of the river, the ever changing river,
hmm
the Greek dude. Uh,
Heraclides.
yeah, that river is different. It is ever changing. If you go to the Sandhill, the old dirt farm where my dad's family grew up, it is literally ever changing because it's a river flowing through sand. So it's shifting all the time. Um, and I wonder if this is RJ giving just a little line there to explain, guys, the song's not coming back because this is different.
hmm
This is not the second age, the Age of Legends. This is the fourth age. It's something new. Um, and then you get to the actual end where Rand encounters a Gawyn or Elaine, and she's all weird and what the heck. And then you get down towards the end of, for me, page 748. Rand looked into Elaine's eyes, looked into them deeply. A shadow lurked back there behind them. Oh, it was an innocent shadow, but a shadow nonetheless. It was like that like that shadow behind the eyes of someone who had been turned to the Dark One. Rand jumped to his feet and stumbled backwards. WTF, man. That says a ton about turning to the shadow and what that means, but then also what Rand has done here. It is, you know, the gif of the mind exploding,
What
sparkles everywhere.
no accidents here, and I assume Jordan had this in his notes or he wrote both sections. Every man has the Dark One's fingers on his heart. And what Rand did was created a world where he removed that. It's what
Yeah,
makes you you. It's the natural part of you that could go wrong at any moment.
the yin and yang, the push and pull.
hmm
Um, and then Rand has a freak out here of, what have you done here? He shouted to the sky. Shaitan, answer me. Shaitan, Rand bellowed. I have done nothing, adversary. The voice was distant. This is your creation. Nonsense. You've changed her. You've changed them all. Did you think that removing me from their lives would leave them unaltered? I turn men to me, Shaitan said. It is true. They cannot choose good once I have made them mine in that way. How is this any different, adversary? If you do this, we are one. No, Rand screamed. And this is where I think I was right in the song's not going to be found because the wheel turns. No, the world would be perfect without you. And this is the Dark One's response. Perfect, unchanging, ruined. Do this if you wish, adversary. In killing me, I would win. Just in that short section at the end of that, there it says Jordan says so much about the nature of the Dark One, but also not just the nature of the world he has created, but the nature of humanity,
Mm-hmm.
of us, and of why good stories, no matter where they're set, no matter if they're, you know, set in the real world or fantasy or science fiction, or, why do people love Star Trek so much? Because at its height, it said something about humanity. It said something about our humanness, our goodness, and our badness. It didn't matter what that the setting was fantastical and centuries in the future. The people were still people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also the if you what's the saying? If you have no light, there is no darkness, there's no
Mm-hmm.
shadows or whatever. If you have no fear, then you're not brave, right?
Mm,
If you have no anger, then you don't have self-control. You need that other part to be virtuous. Without the other
yeah,
part, it's not virtuous. You're just doing you.
yeah, it's a good point. Well,
You get a nice serotonin hit if you do the virtuous thing, by the way. So do it. Future forecasting makes you only think of the negative part of doing the good thing, but if you do the good thing, you will be better off.
yeah. All right. Well, that is all I had. Did we have any comments from our
We
last
did not
episode?
have any comments. So gosh, step up, Scott. Isomorphic.
Yeah, get with it. What the
There's a
heck,
lot
yo?
of philosophy here. You gotta get with it now.
Maybe they're saving it up for the very end, where when we get to the conclusion of the Rand Dark One
60 more
encounter.
pages in my version.
Yeah.
And
Well, we made it 50 there in my book. That was 698 to 748. So that was more than the last couple of sections, but oof, it's still tough sledding. So we'll
my
see how
my
far we make it
next
next
yeah,
time.
my next note is in about 10 pages, and I said, God, Sando, stop already. So I'm trying to figure out I'll have to figure out what that was. Oh, it's a Talmanese section, so that's probably why.
Yeah. Yeah, there is
Oh, it's Talmanese telling jokes and
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
couple of sections coming up that I'm not looking forward to.
Well, if
So,
it's okay with you, Isomorphic, can we say this section does not matter and we can skip past it?
I mean, there's still, geez, the chapter doesn't end until page 810 in my book.
Yeah, it's
And
898 in my version, which is
so
again 65 pages from where I'm
yeah,
at.
so I mean, if we stay on pace, we might be able to finish it next time if we go about like we did today. Hopefully a little bit sooner, because there are several mat sections and there's only so many times we can say, "Damn it, Sanderson." So maybe
Actually,
that's
I
the
only
good thing.
maybe I was it was a war of attrition as I was reading back through this again because I covered that whole what we've done in
Uh,
the last 3 episodes plus what's left all in kind of one sitting session. And I've only got 3 more notes for the rest of this chapter.
all right. Well, we'll see how far we get then, and we will see y'all next time then. And Saturday, I mean, we will
Oh, this is
obviously the
yeah.
election will have passed, but we will have the fallout from the election. So
Well,
we
and
might
we're
have some
probably
interesting
going to
things
watch
to
a lot
talk
of
about.
coverage on it before then. So let's
Yeah.
text back and forth and like think of unique takes that we can bring to the
Mhm.
table here. Because we'll cover some of the stuff that everybody's saying, but yeah, maybe one or two talking points that you're not hearing from other people, and maybe try to do that so we can bring something to the table.
Yep.
Uh, and we're going to be more clear on it because there's still room for shenanigans. It is not likely, and if they happen, it's so big now that it would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
obvious. But we're already hearing Russia and all this stuff, and is that's the standard line. We'll probably be hearing that for 4 more years.
Oh, joy.
Yeah, there was
All right.
one CNN host that, or maybe he was a panelist or whatever. He gave about a 3 minute speech that's worth listening to because basically he looked at everybody else in the panel. He said, "Let's come to grips here and just why not? Let's realize that we're kind of out of touch." And he gave a 2 minute speech on that. I was like, "Thank you. That's what, yeah." Maybe if you had a primary, maybe if you didn't try to insult men into voting for you, maybe if she could have memorized 3 things that she would have done different from Biden because she's going to know she's going to get that question every time. I'm married to a wonderful woman, and I can name 3 things that I would have decided different over the time we've been married.
Hmm.
Without insulting her in any way, shape, or form, as she
Yep.
made this decision, and I would have done differently. We could do that if in that relationship. Why couldn't she do that over the course of a 4-year presidency?
Because she's a Gawyn. Ah, there you go. There's some. That was for you, Scott.
uh, you know what? This is how bad it was. Egwene's better.
Is that going to be our thumbnail meme?
Oh,
All right. We will see y'all next time.
later.